Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you here for our webinar entitled Hope into Action, Young Voices for Environmental Justice, Health, and Community Resilience. My name is Heather McNeil, and I am the Media and Communications Coordinator here at Alaska Community Action on Toxics, or ACAT, and Che Alaska is part of the broader international network of over almost 5,000 individuals and organizations across the globe. We have a wonderful lineup of speakers here today. So this webinar is being recorded and it may run longer than the hour. If you're unable to stay for the full discussion, our recording will be available on our website and our YouTube channel in the next few days, so you could catch up on the rest of the conversation at your convenience. The chat box is enabled now. So please introduce yourself, where you're joining us from, if you're joining with an organization. The chat box will be turned off during the conversation, so please use the Q&A box for any questions for our panelists. Now I will pass it on to our facilitator for the day, Rhea Larson, ACAT's ITAP intern, to share more about our speakers and our topic.
Good morning. My name is Rhea Larson and my Yupik name is Miknayak. I am from Anchorage. My Yupik family is from Nunapichuk in the Bethel area of Southwest Alaska, and my Mexican American family is from the Central Valley in California. I am an ITEP Tribal Wellbeing for Seven Generations Internet ACAT. Young people are at the forefront of movements for environmental and climate justice, community health, and social change. Today, we have the opportunity to have an important conversation with young leaders. Aisha Yamani, Charity Rapati, Sunny Akhiatkik, Jaden Lampe, and Jasmine Bent. We will learn how these young adults are advocating for healthier communities and environments, creating meaningful change, overcoming challenges, and inspiring the next generation of environmental and community leaders. With that, I will hand it over to Aisha.
Chamai Baningoch Aisha Yamani Shiia Kilan Afro Kwagungok Di Chanana Kutana, third generation Korean American Ashlan Shida, Kwagungok Tochak Shugu Shakaya Kilanda, Dachayagak Odi Shugu Yashida. My name is Aisha Yamani. My Yupik name is Baningoch. I am Afro Yupik, Dichinanik, and Korean from Anchorage, Alaska. My Amaus or great grandparents are Emma Isaac from Kwagungok and Jack Stewart Sr. from McGrath. What inspired me to become involved in environmental advocacy was my upbringing. As a child, although I was born and raised in the city, my mom always made effort to envelop me in Yupik and Korean culture. So I grew up picking berries, traditional Yupik dancing, and playing or competing in traditional Arctic sports. I attended the Alaska Native Cultural Charter School. At home and at school, I was immersed and accustomed to Yupik and other Indigenous Alaskan languages and activities. Every year in April, I would watch the newest Disney film they would release for International Earth Day. Naturally, as I got older, I wanted to protect this way of life I was shown, to live in harmony with the land, not against it. In 2016, I joined Alaska Youth for Environmental Action, which really expanded my mindset about how taking environmental action can look for youth.
Charity, you can go ahead and introduce yourself now.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be alongside these incredible youth who I know personally and look up to and do work alongside here at home in Alaska, but also in the international space. So, Guyana for having me. Waka everyone, my name is Charity Ropati. I am Yupik and Samoan, and my given name is Ukuvach. I'm a member of the native village of Kangelunuk, Alaska, which is right on the coast of Southwest Alaska. I am fortunately back home here in Alaska and have been here for the past week to help with subsistence, but work as a water engineer in Lenapehoking or New York City, where I also serve as a climate advisor to the UN Secretary General at the United Nations, representing the Arctic region, alongside 13 incredible youth. There's like 4 Indigenous youth who are a part of it. It's really historic, and we just need more Indigenous peoples in these spaces, but particularly that of Indigenous youth, because I firmly believe we have the solutions. And I think for me, what brought me into environmental justice, it really ties back to the stories we all grew up hearing, right? I think there's a story that my mom and my grandmother, a story that they would always tell me and my siblings when things got just really hard. I think there's something that needs to be said about going to school, uh K through 12, like here in Anchorage, there's a lot of like racism, and there was this story of relocation my family would always remind us of, and how this innovation, this natural way of engineering, this natural way of thinking is kind of like the original way, is a solution to what we're seeing right now. And so we relocated from Wig to create Kongagana. And she would always tell us that what we're doing now, we need to continue the legacy that was started by our grandparents, right? Our great grandparents who made that difficult decision to relocate at a time where the government didn't really help our people. And so I wanted to solve this water infrastructure issue. And so for me, that was kind of like my way into climate justice, right? It's our way of life, and it's our way of ensuring that there's accountability, right, in this work. Not only are we leading with love, but ensuring that we also get the justice that our communities deserve.
Okay, Sunny, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like Charity said, I'm really grateful to also be on this panel with such amazing people. I think this is the first time that this group of us have been in a space together, even though it's virtual. It's still really powerful, so I'm really grateful. But Uvlalotak, Uvangorona, Akivgok, Akaga Mary Frances Akivgok, Apaga Buster Akivgok, Amauga Otis Akivgok. My English name is Sunny. And my Inupiaq name is Aruna. My maternal family is from Utqiagvik, Alaska, and my paternal family is from Guadalajara, Mexico. I live here on Lower Tanana Dana lands in Fairbanks. Um, I work as the organizing lead at Native Movement, and for those that are unfamiliar, we're an Indigenous-led Alaska-wide nonprofit that is dedicated to building a healthy and sustainable future with an Indigenous worldview while building people power. So we uplift grassroots projects and campaigns across the state that are dedicated to protecting our lands and waters while following the leads of leaders most impacted. Um, and my tie to environmental justice is my intersectionality of identities and witnessing climate change at such rapid rates in the Arctic, but it also comes from just being a moral human. I think that we all have to have this responsibility to advocating for our environment, regardless of what our identity is. And it comes from a place of deep compassion and love for our lands and peoples across the world. Um, yeah, I'll talk more about that later. I'll pass it to Jaden.
Uvlalotak, Uvunga Jaden Lampi, Inipaxinin, Akanyagalu, Topelakalu, Utkagavigmi Urunga, Anna Yukaka, Jocelyn Peely, and Zachary Peely, and Wiggins Lampi, Alpaga Wiggins Lampi Sr., Alpaga Glenn Everkana Sr., Akaga Doreen Lampi, Akaga Josie Nashakanek. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaden Lampi. My Inupiaq names are Akanyik and Taveluk. I was born and raised in Utqiagvik, and my parents are Jocelyn Peely and Zachary Peely and Wiggins Lampi Jr. My Alpas are Wiggins Lampi Sr. and Glenn Roy Everkana Sr. And my Akas are Doreen Lampi and Josina Shuknik. Thank you to Alaska and ACAT for inviting me here. Um, what really inspired me to care about the environment, it always just kind of lingered for me there. Like growing up in Nukagavik, I would play outside with my cousins, and like I even as a child, like I'd notice like the sea ice like changing and all the wildlife that would be harmed with all the environmental issues surrounding me. So I just wanted to do something about it. So I've just been in so many advocating spaces. I joined Alaska Youth for Environmental Action, which is really one of my very first steps with like meeting the environmental community and like, making change in the youth while in Alaska. That was in 2022, and I just finished up my last part of it in 2025, and I'm a student at University of Alaska Southeast, and I get to intern with Southeast Alaska Conservation Council, where I get to advocate for the land and protect the Tongass National Forest. And I'm just very happy to be protecting Alaska's lands and waters. And that's kind of what inspired me, because like you don't want to wait to make difference. You start now as like youth of Alaska. Again, thank you guys for having me. I'll pass it to Jasmine.
Good morning. Uvanga atiga Siknik Kavi Sapa Mingaranga. My Inupiaq name is Siknik and it means the sun. I have two Khoikan names. The first one is Bida Yinslet and it means we can depend on her. The second one is Hakuth and that means she's right there for us all the time. My English name is Jasmine Vent and I'm Khoikan and Athabaskan from the village of Huslia, Alaska. My mother's family comes from Ambler, Alaska. I was raised in the village of Huslia by my great grandma, so I grew up living a subsistence lifestyle. And something that you all have just reminded me of thinking about childhood stuff is that my grandma often brought up this concept of "Tsukut Tkoyak Hadni," which in our Khoikan language translates to you take what your grandparents teach you and you let those teachings guide you through life. And I think that as a child, thinking back on what it was my grandma had taught me was, getting food, going and helping others, sharing with others, making sure you're visiting with people and making sure that everybody is okay. And more in regards to how I got into advocacy work and how it relates to that is when I had started college at a young age at UAF, I was a business student and I needed an elective, so I took an Alaska Native history class. And that kind of just changed the whole trajectory of my career. I was like, whoa, what happened to our people? Um, and I just got super involved from there. And it was also the Ambler, No Ambler Road Coalition that got me really involved in this work. And I just think that it's really important. Well, at that time, I thought it was very important for me to get involved because I saw all these decisions being made without our people at the table having a voice within those decisions. And, I believe that the decisions we make today will have lasting impacts on our communities. And I felt that getting involved is one way that I can contribute back to my home community and making sure that our voices are in these decision-making processes that are directly impacting our lives. Because oftentimes these decisions are being made by people who have never even been to our communities or have lived our way of life or can even understand our way of life. So that's kind of how I got involved. I've been very involved with the No Ambler Road Coalition for the last decade. And for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been heavily involved in the Yukon Kuskokwim salmon claps and doing advocacy for salmon in those areas. Um, but yeah, happy to be here. That's how I got involved. Happy to see some of my friends' faces this morning and just be on this call with such great leaders. Thank you.
Okay, Aisha, could you talk to us about how a little bit more about how culture, family, or community has shaped the way you approach this work?
Yes, so culture, family, and community has shaped the way I approach this work by primarily remembering that I am the eldest sibling, I'm the eldest daughter. I have three brothers and one sister. So I try to remember that whatever actions I do in life will not only affect me, but affect my siblings and other younger generations behind me. Living within Yupik culture teaches me to think about the community and not solely focus on individualistic goals.
Thank you. Charity, could you tell us a little bit more about what inspired you to become involved in environmental and community advocacy?
Yeah, I always talk about that story, but truly it's that story that like really gets me through the hardest of times. I think like much, there's like this term used a lot in the international space, but like the global north, global south. I think many cities in the global north are cities like New York City are experiencing things that our people, our grandparents, our own parents, even those that came before them, things that we predicted are experiencing these things, right? We're seeing these huge fires that are going throughout First Nations communities in Canada, which is slowly encroaching in cities like New York. And you're seeing kind of like the wider American population come face to face with things that we've always known from our families and communities. And so when we think about, sorry if I'm not like answering the question either, but when we think about like that like family and community type advocacy, I think the things that are being talked about now, especially in the climate movement, these are things that our people have been talking about for the past 50, 60, 70 years, right? I mean, what we saw in the Southwest, these were things that my great-grandparents predicted in the early 1900s, and it's why we relocated. And I think time and time again, we're seeing kind of like the same cycle where, you know, people in the environmental space look to Indigenous peoples for solution, but there's like a huge lack of investment in that. And furthermore, there's a lack of investment in the work being led by our Indigenous youth. And so I'm talking specifically about this because I think what Indigenous youth are doing now is, you know, growing, it's important. We have to lead with kindness. We have to be kind. We have to have humility. We have to have respect. But we have a choice right now about who do we respect, right? And that's when this environmental justice aspect comes into this. Who needs to be held accountable for what's happening? And that's why like I'm really happy Jasmine is on here too, because I'm really inspired by the work that she's doing with the No Ambler Road. It's hard, especially with what this administration is doing, but because of Indigenous youth here in the state are holding the line and creating an environment of really asking ourselves, you know, what kind of future do we want to create for ourselves? And they're saying, well, if there needs to be accountability, there needs to be justice in that work. And I think we need more of that. I think people need to listen to that and to invest in that. And so, yeah, my family community, they taught me to do these things with respect and love. But I think what our youth are teaching us now, my friends, the sisters, the people that I do my work alongside with is we're also challenging this narrative, right? By saying we could still do this work of accountability, this work of justice, this work of take these feelings of, you know, sometimes even frustration, anger that we're feeling, and obviously sprinkle in some kindness, but like really ensure that people are held accountable, that big oil is held accountable, and that we're naming the players, naming the big actors that are responsible for what the devastation of what we're seeing, what we saw last October. So that's what I think about when I think about what you just asked me, right? I think about we're taught to respect, humility, all of these things, but I think we're also creating this new beautiful narrative that is so needed. Because we're creating these accountability mechanisms. I mean, one of the biggest reasons why we even talk about climate justice in the international space is because of the Indigenous peoples movement, but is that of Indigenous youth, right? And that of youth specifically who held the line, who protested, who was like, wait, this is not how we need to do things. If we don't want to see our homes being burned or our homes being, you know, taken out to the ocean. Yeah, so that's my answer to that. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Everything you pointed out was really important. That actually leads really well into this next question for Sunny. When people hear environmental justice, they usually only think about pollution or climate change. What does environmental justice mean in your community?
Yeah, thank you. This is a topic that I think is kind of like the theme of our lives of this generation, is what just transition is, and I'll talk more about that. But my mom is from Utqiagvik, and I don't live there now, but I've thought deeply about what environmental justice looks like for a community like Utqiagvik, which is heavily reliant on oil and gas and oftentimes culturally identifies with the fossil fuel industry, while also experiencing extremely rapid rates of climate change and environmental pollution. There's a principle called just transition in climate justice circles, with just being like justice. and transition, meaning the transition away from systems that are reliant on fossil fuel extraction, which is our entire world right now. But in Alaska, we've discussed this topic as being called remembering forward. Our ancestors knew how to live in equilibrium with our environment and the reciprocity of respect and the giving and taking that was required for not just survival, but for our thriving as well. And in remembering forward, we're not abandoning the modern way of living. We're remembering the practices and the worldviews of our ancestors that knew that balance and bringing it forward into our lives while also leaving behind, the practices that don't make sense for our lives right now. But identifying that come is requires us coming together with a common goal of identifying that and having that as being our future. In Just Transition Principles, there's an emphasis on prioritizing the needs and the well-being of frontline communities, meaning communities that are most impacted by the pollution, the extraction, and whose jobs and livelihoods are reliant on the income that comes with extractive industry. In other words, that's exactly like our community in Utqiagvik and Alaska as a whole. And it's unwise to believe that we'll be able to continue to rely on the fossil fuel industry to put food on our table, and also to just live in general. Um, and the places that we extract are not only limited, but the rate at which that we're consuming fossil fuels is just like past unsustainable. It's also society threatening. But another side of the coin is the push for renewable energy, which is a stepping stone in the just transition away from fossil fuels, but it's not our final answer. Like Jasmine and Charity were saying about Ambler Road, that is connected to the renewable energy, the push for renewable energy, which is necessary to transition away from fossil fuels, but it shouldn't come at the cost of the well-being of our communities. So we don't want the Ambler Road in Alaska. We also have to know that we can't extract our way out of climate change. We have to take a much deeper look into our relationship with consumption of energy and realize that our ways of living in the United States are selfish, they're imperialistic, they're extractive. Lithium and cobalt mines have been the cause of genocide and extreme suffering and political turmoil, so that we can have the newest iPhone, so that we can have solar energy, so that we can continue to, be at the forefront of development of, being productive. But um, that productivism is coming at the cost of the well-being of our communities in Alaska, but also communities across the world. And there's a better way of living. And although it seems scary, we have to be brave enough to scheme on what that reality looks like for our future. I think that was kind of like a roundabout way of of answering what environmental justice looks like. I wouldn't say that that is what it looks like for my community in Utqiagvik, but I think it is what it looks like for me and the people that I interact with and the community that I build. So those are just like my personal views and the views that and the conversations that I have with the people that I do this work with as well. I could talk about that for a really long time. So if anybody's interested, reach out to me.
Thank you, Sunny. I think we've heard a pretty decent amount about other people's backstory. Jaden, could you tell us a bit more about your backstory and how that has led to where you're currently at?
Yeah, also like being from a Caregiver, it's kind of like that's all you kind of hear really. People see the North Slope as some sort of extracting oil company and they don't see it as like the cultures and the traditions of the Inupiaq people of the North Slope. That's like having environmental justice is our way of living. We've always had this connection with our land and just having a very like a spiritual connection, really. Like the animals give their life to us, the weather helps us live, and just having like seeing us like humans as like equals as the life around us is we need to really take back take that back with us. And yeah, kind of with my background with that, it's just kind of I do everything just for the love of the land, really. Like people don't really do things for love, just out of the love of their heart. It's always like, what about money this? What about this? Or how will it affect these things? And it's just having that connection with the land that really inspires me of what all I do. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Thank you. Jasmine, Charity mentioned about the No Ambler Road. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So the Ambler Road is a proposed 211-mile road that would cut through the Brooks Range in Alaska. And it's aimed at developing mining in our area. I had gotten involved with this when I was 12 years old. It was the first meeting. I went to an Ambler Road meeting in the village of Huslia. And at the time, it was the initial discussion, and they had all these different maps of these different routes that the road could potentially take, right? But what really stuck with me as a 12-year-old at that meeting, at the time, my great grandma was still alive, and a lot of our elders are still alive. Since then, a lot of our elders have passed away. We just have a few more left in Huslia. Every single elder showed up to those meetings, and even if they didn't fully understand all of the details that I don't know which agency was there trying to push for the development. They knew that showing up and saying no is what matters. And they knew that the potential impacts of what this road could bring. And then and there, it was very clear that the opposition was there and it's not going to go away. And I would say now today that opposition is tenfold. It's even going to continue to grow from here. We have a lot of international support now. Um, Huslia is one of the villages that would be impacted by the road, but my mom's family also comes from Ambler. So both villages that I'm from would be impacted by the development. And even though tribal voices have been very loud in terms of the opposition. Unfortunately, our state of Alaska delegation has their own agenda with this development. There are currently 88 tribal resolutions opposing the Ambler Road, and there are 6 tribal resolutions supporting the Ambler Road. Um, Easy math, right? So it's very clear that we don't want it. But not only that, even if you were to take the entire tribal perspective out of the conversation, right? It's not economically feasible, it's not responsible development, and it just simply doesn't make sense. And at the end of the day, um, with my experience being involved for the last decade, I can say with confidence that the Ambler Road has a lot less to do with mining and it has a lot more to do with opening up the Arctic for um, industrialization and trying to turn Alaska just like the rest of the lower 48. And then, 100 years from now, our villages would be cities. Our villages are trying to be opened up. Our land is trying to be opened up. And once that happens, that's not going to go away. It's going to bring an influx of hunters into our area. Our people heavily rely on subsistence in our area. In Huslia, people still primarily get their food from the land and the water. Unfortunately, without being able to fish for salmon, we're already experiencing very severe impacts in our communities that we have yet to really see these consequences and the ways they're going to play out in our life. But what we know right now is that people are really grieving without fish. Family dynamics are changing. Traditional practices are not being passed on. And we don't know how that's going to be impacting us and our people 10, 20, 30 years from now. But what we do know right now is that it is an emergency. So when you take the salmon collapse into consideration with the Ambler Road, it's like, okay, the reason why we're in the salmon collapse is because of the mismanagement by the state of Alaska in our fisheries. Why would we trust the state of Alaska to develop a road on our land? It simply doesn't make sense, and it's just not responsible development at the end of the day. Our voices have been really clear. The opposition is going to continue to grow, and I think right now is a really crucial time to be speaking out on the Ambler Road because with this administration, a lot of people are losing hope because they think it's like final and think that it's going to go through no matter what. But right now, that's really not the case. In the fine print, in the details, that's really not the case. There's still a lot of obstacles that the state and these foreign mining companies have to go through in order for this development to be pushed through. So right now, I think it's a very crucial time to build that opposition and make that stance even more clear of that opposition because if people lose hope, then people back away and it's easier for them to just cut through. And something that, in regards to this development, something that's been a very big point of discussion is that a lot of the extractive industries that are at play within this development spread misinformation. And I think it's really important to debunk that misinformation. For example, they say that they're going to bring a lot of money to our people. That's not the case. If you look at the history of other industrial development that has happened in the state, it has never contributed to Alaska Native communities in the way that they've said. If anything, it's just further destructed our culture and our way of life. And within that, it disconnects us not only from our land and our water, but from ourselves, from our families. Even without fishing right now, there's a lack of connection with our families because we're used to spending our summers in fish camp with each other every single day, doing this hard work, partaking in this healthy activity. Without that, people are like, what do I do? What do I eat? And I think that right now is not a time for us to be pushing for the development. Right now is a time for us to be focusing on the issues we already have in our communities and trying to find solutions to the obstacles that we're facing now. Um, but it can be really difficult when our delegation is opposing us, right? But that's what I feel a lot of hope, especially being in this call with such amazing leaders. We are making change and we're only going to continue to increase that, spread the word more. I'm really inspired by everyone on this call, and I think that, our people, our villages, we really do have a lot of answers to a lot of these issues that the world is facing right now. Alaska is a very hot spot for extractive industries right now, and I think that we have one of the last intact ecosystems in the world, and we must do everything to protect that. Um, and it's not just I also want to reiterate, it's not just a native issue too. This is going to impact everybody, everyone. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry, I can go on a tangent about the Ambler Road all day, but if anybody, ever has any specific questions, feel free to reach out. Sunny has a lot of amazing information too. Sunny does a lot of good work in terms of Ambler Road, so thank you to Native Movement for always being on top of everything. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Aisha, we've heard about the work from other people. Could you tell us more about your past and or current work that you're doing?
Sorry, who is the question for?
It was for Aisha.
Oh.
Aisha.
Can you hear me? Okay, can you repeat your question, please? The audio went out.
Yes, we've heard more about other people's work. Could you tell us more about your past and current work that you're doing?
Yes. Um, so my past work, my environmental work began with Alaska Youth for Environmental Action, right? And then so basically took the initiative to learn about what's going on in the world around me. So the campaign we were working on in 2016 was the Save Our Salmon campaign. There was a proposed mining project in the Chitwa River, which flows near Tyonek. And like the river is a life source. Our water, not our water, it's everybody's water. So it is a life source for all of us. And so subsistence lifestyles were threatened by this pack rat mining project. And over the course of 2 years, we were able to get the proposal to back down. And I did get to learn about like policies in Alaska. Or a little bit before that, actually, I had the chance to visit Dillingham, which is one of my family's villages, and I was taking a geographic information systems class. But while I was there was discussion about how can villages use GIS or geographic systems to help them in their advocacy. And some ideas people were thinking to use it for was in regards to women, um, and to help track like the animal movement, especially bears and salmon, because right now, or at least at that time, uh, the state like Twin Hills area, because to them the bears were overpopulated. But I personally don't believe that just killing the bears is a good way to help other animals thrive and help humans practice subsistence. I think that's a very colonial tool or way to go about it. And then last year, actually, I was able to visit the communities on the Yukon. So empty I got to see empty fish camps, and that was very upsetting, because I know that fish and practicing our subsistence ways brings families together, and there are um, like old beliefs that come with gathering your family together to harvest fish. There's specific knowledge that you can't learn in an urban setting, that you can't learn outside of your culture. So when we have these fish camps and when we have these opportunities to practice subsistence together, that is the time for elders and other knowledge keepers to transmit this old knowledge to the younger generations. Um, and currently, I'm an intern at Kaweruk, and it's an organization that helps advocate for Inuit Nunat. Specifically, I'm placed in the Marine program, and my project this summer is to basically investigate how weather balloon launches in Alaska have been defunded by this administration. I can go on, but I can pass it to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this question was supposed to be for, but it's from a chat. So, have any of you connected with young people in Canada to raise attention to your projects and gain opposition in Canada?
I can answer that a little bit from the work that I'm doing. I'm on this call today as a just me, not representing my work at all, but I am currently the communications director for the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission. And within our commission, we have 45 member tribes, and it's aimed at conservation and advocacy for salmon and trying to rebuild our salmon stocks. And within that, we have been trying to do more outreach with First Nations in Canada. And I believe in about a week and a half, we're going to be going to the Moose Hide Gathering in Dawson at, I think it's called like the Moose Hide Village. So there we're going to be connecting with more Canadian youth in regards to Yukon River salmon advocacy. Um, but specifically in terms of No Ambler Road, I would say I've connected with youth from Canada during like international travels that like Charity and I have gone on. Specifically for me with the Arctic Council, I've been able to meet a lot of really inspiring youth from Canada. But I think that our relationships and our connections with Canadian youth definitely needs to be increased and there needs to be more dialogue there. So I think that's something that's really being built up and I look forward to connecting more with.
Yeah, I can add to that too. Yeah, I met Jasmine, yeah, through the international space and got to see her in person finally in Norway. And that was amazing. But I was there with Inuit Circle Polar Council, and so ICC does really great work in connecting Inuit in Russia, Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. So across Inuit Nunat. And they have like youth programs connecting all of these youth, but it's particularly powerful because, when you think about states and nations, I call them like their silly conflicts. I probably shouldn't, this is off the record from my role as an advisor, but these states and nations kind of like they have these conflicts, right? And particularly like with Russia, but indigenous peoples have always been able to maintain their diplomatic relations with each other. And this is out of survival, this is out of love. And I think that's really beautiful. And this is something ICC has always been able to do. And under them, I've been able to like create friendships with other Inuit across the Arctic. And I think that's really powerful because we're kind of revitalizing something that existed thousands of years ago. And when you do that, you're able to share knowledge, but also advocate on behalf of each other um, at specific conferences, at COPs, these conference of parties, which is like a climate negotiations. You're able to do this alongside your relatives. And that's important because it creates, when you're creating these relations that are honestly ancient and older than even this country, which is like only 250 years old, art where we come from, it's over 10,000 years old. And that's really powerful, if not more. So yeah, it's important that connect with people, whether it's on social media, but also connect through these incredible organizations like ICC, ACAT as well. Just any opportunity to connect with other Indigenous youth across these so-called borders, do it, because there's so much that we can learn when we connect with folks.
Thank you. Michaela asked what are actions that people can take to impact the issues you guys are talking about. For example, Ambler Road, salmon fisheries, and oil extraction, or just anything.
I can add to that. I'm not aware of any current like public comments that are open, especially around the Ambler Road or oil and gas. And I'm not super in touch with salmon fisheries, so I'd leave that to to Jasmine. But I think that especially for extractive industries, staying up to date with the work that communities are doing is super important. So, like Jasmine mentioned, No Ambler Road Coalition is active on social media, especially Instagram. They're a really great place to stay up to date with the work that is happening around there. But also staying up to date with nonprofits like ACAT, Native Movement, Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission. There's like a whole list of them, amazing Alaskan organizations that are really like leading this work and bringing people together around it. But along that same line, I think that nonprofits are just the vehicle for pushing these campaigns forward and this like people building, relationship building forward, but it's not the solution, it's not the answer. We have to think broader than just what our nonprofits are able to do because nonprofits are very limited in the work that we can do legally and also just like this isn't work that is fit into a 9 to 5 job. This is work that we have to be committed to interpersonally and for a lifetime. But just for like the advocacy to stay informed, nonprofits are a great way to educate yourself. But of course, it always boils down to how you show up in the day to day too. But yeah, long story short, I don't know of any current actionable items that you can do like within the next hour.
And just to add on to that really quick, thank you, Sunny, for sharing all of that. Um, I think that just I don't know any call to actions right now too, but definitely stay involved at the No Ambler Road Instagram, and then the Yukon River Intertribal Fish Commission Instagram is at Yukon River Salmon. But I just wanted to add, I think something that has really been beneficial in terms of my advocacy is even just simply talking about it at the dinner table and just talking about it with your friends. I think just spreading awareness about these issues can really go a long way. You never know whose ears it's going to fall upon and whether or not they have the means to really make something happen about it. And I think that just spreading general awareness about it, talking with your friends and family can really help out in a lot of ways.
Thank you. A question I want to focus on before 11, just in case you guys can't stay longer, is someone asked if you had any, what challenges did you face as an Alaska Native woman entering the field, and how did you overcome them? And I'd like to add um, that advocacy can be rewarding, but it's also emotionally challenging. So, how do you care for your mental health while doing this work?
I feel like I could say something, not to hog the mic or anything. In terms of, I guess, just taking care of ourselves, I feel like for me personally, that's something I'm still learning. I'm sure that can resonate with a lot of us on this call. Being in this work can be a very big emotional toll, especially when we're fighting for our own ways of life and we have our own connection to these things that we're fighting for. But something that has really helped me is that I feel like I've gotten so involved in the work that my entire life started to revolve around it. And I take care of my younger siblings, and I was like, whoa, I needed to take a step back a little bit and just bring some balance to my life. And I realized that if we're fighting for our way of life, we can't forget to be living our way of life. So it's been a big priority to me to not just focus on work, but work half the time, go home half the time, be on the land, spend time with my family, making sure that we're engaging in healthy activities, even though we can't fish for salmon right now, still engaging in fishing for non-salmon species like whitefish and pike and learning how to preserve our foods that we've always eaten while we don't have fish. I've been rabbit snaring a lot, snowshoeing a lot, going out to the wood yard a lot and getting wood, just making sure that I'm staying engaged in healthy activities, I think has been a really big help for that. Um, but advocacy is emotionally challenging when, especially in spaces when your people can be talked down on. It's important to not really take that to heart, but it's really hard in the time. And I think that's something that I'm sure we're all still learning to navigate. Um, so what helps is just trying to stay connected to my community and my culture, spend time on the land whenever I can, and remind myself why I'm doing this work and what it is that I'm fighting for. Um, but yeah, and also just reminding ourselves that change takes time and every conversation is an opportunity to make a difference. Even just this call, I'm sure there's a lot of very positive things that will come from this call. Um, but yeah, that's what I wanted to add in terms of how the work can be emotionally challenging at times.
Like I could add a little bit onto it. Like a lot of like my emotionally challenging time has been like a part of like a colonial mindset. Like there's just been so many times where I've been thinking like, oh, like I'm not good enough for this, I'm not good enough for this. But like really like just it's always been in there, just haven't really like I'm still trying to decolonize my mind and everything. But really just like going back to like I took a traditional ecological knowledge class, and one of my final projects was having indigenous storytelling as climate justice. So like a lot of the work I do, I was like consult like with my Amaus and my Annas and just hearing what they've done in their land and just like reconnecting back with my roots and with how hard it is. You always have like people who care for you and people who always have the same mindset as you. So just having like the people around me like with the same mindsets really helps me, especially like I'm only 18 and it's just been so hard being so young and angry and it's just always like there's always especially with people in this call like I've heard of all their very good environmental work and it's very inspiring. So I just can't wait to be that kind of person and just continuing on like meeting really great people who care for this world.
I'd like to also add, sorry, I'm not sure if you called on me. My audio went out, and that's why I have my camera off right now to help my computer load. But how I care for my mental health while advocating for our Native communities is by Yurok. Yurok is traditional Yupik dancing. So far in my life, I've spent 16 years of my life traditional dancing. My older cousin, whose name is also Beningok, was a Yukok dancer when she was younger too. I was originally taught how to dance by Lorena Warren from Chivac. There was another auntie that taught us alongside Lorena. Unfortunately, I forget her name. But Yari Walker also taught us how to dance on several occasions. This was at the Alaska Native Cultural Charter School, which I'm very grateful I got to attend when I was a child. And so when I yukak, it helps shake off any negative or overwhelming energy that I feel. I usually just dance here at home from YouTube videos, or I go in the evenings to the hospital, the Native hospital. I've been very busy this summer with my internship and summer classes and other projects, so I haven't gone to community practice in a few weeks, but I plan to start back going. I think yukak is a world of its own. There's levels to yukak in a sense that it helps you connect with your inner spirit and travel within the Yupik levels of awareness. Yukak to me is basically like a religion. It aligns one with the rhythms of the universe. No outside distractions matter in those moments. You just sway with the beat of the drum. Just you, your strength and stamina to dance harder and faster while visualizing the story of the song lyrics in your head as the drummers sing.
Yeah, I think I'll be really quick with mine. I think for me, I've been in New York City. I used to feel guilty about being in New York City, but my family would always tell me home will always be there to welcome you back. And there are things that I'm 25, but there are things that I'm being able to experience that even my own mother and grandmother haven't been able to do, like living in a place like New York, living in the lower 48. They were born and raised like in the village in the Southwest. And so I don't take any opportunity that I have lightly. So it's been a real privilege being there for the past 4 years. Moved there for school. I had a really hard time. I'm really honest about my time. I went to engineering school there in New York City. I went from like a small community in Alaska to a city with over 8 million people. And that was a huge culture shock. And so whenever like most of us, we just call our moms or our parents, our family, whenever that's hard. And she would just, it would go back to the story of my great grandparents, Inakak and Annan, and that story of relocation. She would tell me that because we come from this story of survival, that no one can ever dim my light or make me feel small because that story of survival is the reason why I'm here to this day. Um, and I think coming back home, I try to come back home 3 to 4 months. My role at the UN wraps up at the end of the Secretary General's term, which is why I've been in New York since then. But I try to come home as much as possible. And I tell my friends, it's you just need to touch grass. Like when I tell someone when they're having a hard time, they're feeling down, you need to go outside, even if it's raining, even if it's snowing. You need to connect with the land, wherever that is. So I try and do that, and also creating boundaries. Like it's okay to say no. You need to protect your health too. Like if there's certain things, and I think for many of us, especially in the culture we grew up in, um, we're kind of just like we have to do whatever. You know what I mean? We're just like we're the youngest, taking care of the family or whatever. But you should also do things for yourself. And I think joy is a huge part of this work. It's a part of this resistance work. It's a huge part of this climate justice work. And I was always told, and something that I've especially learned is that you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to ensure that's filled, and whether it's through luck or through dancing, or for me, it's literally like going outside, touching grass, being with my family, the laughter of my family, being alongside like good friends, good sisters that really pour into you, and hold you. Find your people that do that, if you're away from home. So that would be my advice. And that's how yeah, essentially how I take care of myself throughout all of this.
Before we move on, did anyone want to add on to that? The next general question is what opportunities, resources for youth would be the most helpful for bringing about change? And or you guys could talk about why it's important for youth to get into this.
Sorry, I have to go. Right, I have to go, so I'll quickly add. I also do work with the Youth Climate Justice Fund. It's one of the only youth-led regranters that exists like in the world. And so it's like most of it is led by most of the folks in the Global South. But I serve as like their Arctic regional facilitator. So if you're a youth leading your own Arctic youth group, apply for this fund, like the Youth Climate Justice Fund, or it's like ycjf.org. We're particularly looking for like Arctic youth groups who are like holding the line, and holding policymakers accountable and everything. So I would just do that. My apologies, that's my other call. I would just do that. And yeah, connect with us, reach out to us, and I'd be more than happy to share more opportunities. But thank you so much for having me. Thank you, ACAT, Taria. I'm also really inspired by Vi too. Like there's so much we can learn from so many of the Alaskan Native women who've been doing this work for years. So Guyana, for all you do. And yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm inspired by all of you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Yeah, guys, just it is the top of the hour. It's 11, so I'm going to jump in here for anyone who needs to hop off. Please feel free. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I know I've been really moved. I'm super inspired by this conversation. I am from the DC area, so I'm new to Alaska, and it's really inspiring to me to learn so much about all of this. And so I am curious, someone asked in the chat, but I was also wondering, um, at the federal level, the federal government is required to, uh, by law, the federal government is required to work government to government with federally recognized sovereign nations. What steps could or have been taken to better ensure that tribal nations are engaged and empowered in federal actions processes that impact them and their people? What do you want to say to the people in Washington who are speaking on your behalf? I feel like I've learned that people need to be in the space, not being told about the space, if that makes sense.
I can add to that just a little bit. I've done quite a few trips to DC, and just being on the Capitol Hill, engaging a lot of those conversations, I've learned so much. I think in terms of the government to government relationship, um, the federal government can do a way better job at their consultation and their timing in terms of being in communication with tribes. And oftentimes it's like the government coming to the tribes saying what they think the tribes need. But I think it should be the other way around. The tribes should be telling the federal government what it is that they need. Um, but that's, that question for me personally is kind of hard to answer, just because there can be so much improvement on the federal government side to ensure that tribal nations are engaged. But I think on our level, from a tribal level, from a youth level, we can do a good job at making sure that our tribes are aware of a lot of these issues going on, aware of actions that the federal government is taking. And I think that hopefully that relationship will be better in the future. In terms of the salmon claps, I think that us working with the feds is we're starting to build more of a relationship and sitting down and having more dialogue with each other, which is a good thing. But really, I can only speak from a Yukon perspective. And also, just kind of on that note, really quick, because the permits are administered by the state of Alaska and the federal government in regards to Annalise's question about Alaska Fish and Game creating the cultural education permits for salmon fishing while still extending the moratorium for subsistence fishing on the Yukon River. My opinion and thought on that is that I think it's a great opportunity for tribes to be able to pass on their cultural knowledge to youth. I recently was in Nulato where they had that permit, and it was really beautiful to see some of the kids seeing a king salmon for the first time because under that permit, they're allowed to get 10 king salmon. So, although we're in such a crucial time of salmon conservation, that knowledge is still needing to be passed down. And I think that's one way that people are able to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Jaden or Aisha or Jasmine, if any of you guys want to give closing remarks. Charity and Sunny had to hop off the call, but I wanted to open the space to any final comments.
Yeah, I also got a few minutes, but like one final comment would like that helps me in a lot of like environmental work that I do is really just like connecting with the land and like having more of a like just appreciation and having the same levels as like yourself and the trees and the wind and the animals and just like t telling everyone to also have that connection and connecting even with like elders and just hearing from the environment from them from how they lived and just having that connection back.
Hi, so did I hear you correctly that we are sharing our final thoughts?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I have like two different things I wanted to share today. So, one thing I wanted to say was if I could change one policy tomorrow, it would be to reverse the funding cuts enacted by this administration's Department of Government Efficiency. For my project at Keurig, where I currently intern, I've been investigating how weather balloon capacities in Alaska have reduced significantly due to this federal funding reorganization. Weather balloons are typically launched twice a day and have been in use in the United States since the 1930s. In Alaska, the first weather forecast office was established in Juneau in 1917. In the late 1940s, scientists began utilizing instruments, weather balloons, to track atmospheric data. These instruments fly into the upper atmosphere to record temperature, wind, and precipitation. Scientists use the data from weather balloons to make basic daily weather reports, but they can also use them to predict or track nearby storms like typhoons or extreme weather events. The weather balloon data is also important for aviation and marine navigation to use the safest routes as possible. This administration's financial cuts to Alaska resulted in two of our weather stations at Kotzebue and St. Paul Island to become non-operational for the time being. When we don't conduct weather balloon launches, we lose the only chance to record that specific day's data. You cannot retrieve the same high-quality data of a weather balloon after that moment has already passed. We know the Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the world. Weather balloon data is used to track global warming. With this shortage of data coming out of Alaska, I am sure this will reduce the quality of global climate monitoring and weather predictions, especially for extreme weather events. And I just want to reiterate that knowing precise weather conditions and being able to make accurate predictions of the weather is especially important for rural and indigenous Alaskans who practice subsistence. And the advice I would give to another young person who wants to get involved but isn't sure where to start would be to connect with your heritage, your culture. Find something in your culture that you are excited to practice daily, like dancing, for example. I love dancing. When a person has a firm understanding of their identity and connection to their ancestors, this helps kind of pinpoint what sort of action you want to take to preserve the traditional activities you're interested in. And we can't do one person can't do everything, so it's okay to focus on one thing. Overall, connecting with your culture will help you understand why advocating for environmental and indigenous justice is essential for our communities to continue on for thousands of more years. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just have my closing comments really quick before I hop off. I guess I just wanted to add, in terms of youth getting involved, I would tell them that you don't have to be an expert to make a difference. When I first got involved, I felt like I had to know all of the details, all of the information, and be really educated in it, but that really wasn't the case. I started by learning about the issues that affected my community and listened to elders and people that had that lived experience. So I would just say, even just starting there is a really good first step, and don't be afraid to ask questions. As youth, as Native youth, our voices really do matter in terms of a lot of these issues that our communities are facing. And even if you're just beginning, advocacy really starts with caring about your community and being willing to get involved. So the more you learn, the more you get involved, the more confident you'll become. So when I first got involved, I felt like I had to know everything. But you really learn along the way. So this was a really nice call. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all again so much for joining. I think that wraps us up beautifully. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you again for joining us. This call was recorded and it will be up on our website and our YouTube channel in the coming days. So keep an eye out for that. If anyone has any questions, if they'd like to ask the panelists more, I can be in the contact at media@akaction.org. We will have a call next month, not next month, we are skipping August. We'll have our next call in September on data centers in Alaska and the movement that's coming on with that. So please stay tuned for that. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of their day. And we will see you for the next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Buchji.